Good evening, everyone. I am so excited. I just need everyone to know Tuesdays are like the best day in a bookseller's life because all of these new books that we've read from our advanced copies, books that we've gotten excited about, books that we can't wait to see what their cover looks like, they arrive and they're out in the world on Tuesdays, and it feels like this like big bookseller secret that finally gets released to everyone, and we all get to celebrate these new releases together. And I'm saying all of this because we have a new release today that I have been sitting on for months. I've been so excited to talk about it. There's even more exciting news that's been released around it. And we'll definitely get to that this evening. So I just already know this is going to be an incredible event. I was backstage with the author in our virtual green room and just already having an amazing time. So I know that we're going to have so much fun tonight. And if you're not in St. Louis, you wouldn't know this, but in St. Louis, it's kind of like been a gloomy couple of days with like some rain, really like fall gloomy vibes. And so what better way to like kind of lift that spirit than to talk about some fun rom-coms, right? Incredible. So if you don't know me, my name is Stephanie. I'm the director of events for The Novel Neighbor. We are an independent bookstore that is woman-owned and located in St. Louis, Missouri. If you are not in St. Louis, don't worry. We do know how to use the mail. We are happy to ship you books, and we are most happy to ship you this book in particular. So without further ado, if you are like, I'm scrolling on Facebook, what are we talking about this evening? I won't make you wait any longer. We're talking about The Rewind. I'm so excited. There's so much that we're going to get into. This is the New Year's Eve book of your dreams from the incredible Allison Winn Scotch, who is a New York Times bestselling author of 9 novels, including Cleo McDougal Forgets Nothing, In 20 Years, and Time of My Life. She lives in Los Angeles with her family and her 2 rescue dogs, Pele and Mr. Peanut. I got to hear about them a little bit. They also sound incredible. Maybe we'll get lucky and there'll be a dog sighting this evening. Who's to say? So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Allison. Hello.
I also have my book. So
oh my gosh, look at us with our matching.
I don't really need it, but I have it.
But it's a good like security.
You know what? I didn't have my glasses on. This is the arc actually because it says on sale date. So
ours really do match. This is my
arc. You have the arc too. Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. I have a.
Oh no! I'm sure you have like multiple copies.
I do, but I guess I don't have it here. So.
Well, I realized as I was saying how like it's been rainy and like a little bit gloomy in St. Louis. You've probably had incredible weather in Los Angeles, haven't you?
Well, it's been a little chilly for Los Angeles, like it's in the 60s. So I put on my vest.
I don't even want to hear about it.
No, but last week it was like 95, and I was posting on Instagram like, oh, I can't wait for this to be over. And my friends in New York were like, seriously, like shut your pie hole. It's so yeah. So, but it does get like sort of monotonous. So, but
well, that's fair.
Yeah, that's first world problems. So
yes, I mean, and I'm like complaining about being gloomy, and like Halloween gloomy is like perfect. Like what other time would you want it to be?
Exactly. That's perfect weather. So
we're just in like St. Louis likes to lull you into like this weird thing of like today's weather was like when I started the day, I had to put a sweater on. It was 45 degrees outside. By the time I went to, I teach at a local university. By the time I went to WashU to teach, it was like 75 degrees and I had students walking in shorts. And I was like, I don't understand what's happening here. And then it rained again and then it's fine. Like everyone's doing fine. Yeah. But have you had the best like book birthday day?
It's been really like tiring, but in a good way. Like I didn't actually do any real work today because I felt like I was managing. I have another book due, so I have to deal with that. But it's been great. Like it's funny. I have a screenwriter friend who I'm working on something with, and some news of mine got shared a while ago, and he texted me. He's like, "Are people really this happy for you? Like in the book community? Like, is that how it works?" And I was like, "Yeah. Like we are all genuinely pretty supportive of each other because it's not like if one book publishes, it takes the place of another book." So it's just been nice. I've been doing this for a long time, and I have a lot of friends who are rooting for the book, and just as I root for theirs. And that's something, I mean, pretty special, like to have that sort of community of people whose trust you have and friendship you have. So yeah, it's been nice.
I love that. And I also want to throw out this comment from Pam just to also show how great the book community is. Pam said, they've read all of your books. Thank you for the stories. Which is just so true. Like the book community, both authors, I feel like, and bookstores and readers, like it's just such a fun welcoming community. And we're just like, there's so many books for us all to read. Like it's so great when we get new content to read from people. It doesn't take away from anybody
Yeah,
else.
and I think there's also like a kinship if you find somebody, whether you're an author or not, who is a reader. There's almost like a shorthand language there because you can, did you read this book? Did you read this book? Something that you find that you like together. It's just, it's a unique bond. And I do think there are a lot of readers now, but there are a lot of people who don't read now. And so if you find a reader or an author who you mesh well with, it's special.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Which I think this is not quoting books, but I loved that. So your book is pitched as The Hangover meets When Harry Met Sally,
Yeah.
which first of all, perfect timing. Everyone knows that we rewatch When Harry Met Sally
Yeah.
in the fall. That
Yes,
is
my
our
daughter and I will watch it. Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Time to Thrive. Just watched it this weekend. Really, and then like obviously this is like, I'm sorry, everyone. You've had like 20 years to watch this movie,
Yeah.
if not more.
Yes.
It ends on New Year's Eve. So it really like fits the vibe of the rewind incredibly
Yes.
well. But if somebody is not familiar or they've just been excited to talk about the rewind and they haven't read a
Mhm.
lot of it yet, because it did just come out today.
Yeah.
What is the rewind about? And how does it fit into like the hangover and meets When Harry Met Sally? Like what is all of that talking about?
So it's really about two exes who had a catastrophic breakup and haven't seen each other in 10 years and reunite on their college campus for a wedding of good friends of theirs. So they both have to show up. And then that's the prologue, and then it cuts to 16 hours later where they wake up in bed together with like wedding rings on their finger and have no memory of what happened the night before. So that's really, and then they spend the next 300 pages piecing together what happened both 12 hours, 16 hours earlier, but also what happened 10 years ago that led them to sort of retreat to their own corners with not a lot of understanding of what actually went wrong from the other perspective.
Yeah, it's okay. After you get through the prologue, it's so fun because I first I was like, "Oh, she's not gonna do this," and I was like, "Oh, we're up," because I had like read the back of it, but like I for some reason I can read the back of the book and like unless I read it right before I go to open a book, I'm always like, "Oh my god, this is what's happening," and then I'll like go back and read the back of it. I'm like, definitely could have known that. Like
Yeah.
that was pretty much out there. But I read, you know, the prologue and then we got into it and I was just like, oh my gosh, she's giving me everything immediately. Like I love a second chance trope. How did
Me
we
too.
land on a second chance trope?
I just love a second chance trope. I mean, honestly, like most of my books are about whether it's friendship, second chance tropes, or whatever it is. I just, I was talking about this recently with a podcast, and they were like, what is it about it? And I think it is. I've been married for a long time, so I don't want to imply that it is about like a second chance romance. But I think there is something for a lot of people about the nostalgia of their youth that they could go back and sort of relive that time period. And so that's what a second chance trope for me is about. It's sort of capturing that time in your life when sort of you were on the open road and anything was possible in your 20s or college or whenever that would be. So I really love exploring that and sort of the dichotomy of getting older. But also this, I said this in the acknowledgments. I came up with this idea. I was just like spitballing in the middle of COVID. I was taking a walk with my friend Laura Dave. We were talking because we couldn't like have human contact at the time. So, and I felt like I needed to start writing something. And I was just like, hey, what happens if you have like two exes who wake up and they don't know what happened? And I don't think I initially had them married. And she was the one who suggested the college campus to make it even more nostalgic. So it was just something that felt like right in my wheelhouse. Like I just love exploring the road not taken.
And I think that's why I also love a second chance trope. And it also gave me When Harry Met Sally vibes of like, I know that that's not, we get them like throughout each other's like lives a little bit more than like Frankie and Ezra, because like
Yeah,
it's pretty hardcore. Like we haven't seen or talked to each other for 10
right,
years. Not that we've been like missing,
right.
ships in the night, figuring out when's our opportunity. Um, but it's still like you're just like, okay, because we don't know at first what happened to them. We like aside from the fact that they hate each other and that like all of their friends know this and that it's like a big dramatic thing. We don't know necessarily like what caused the breakup, what the circumstances are behind it. But it's I love a miscommunication trope too. So like it's just like a what happened here, like what
Yeah,
did we do? Um in time to still make some other decisions because our guy Ezra is first of all this is a bone I have to pick with Ezra, which is
yeah,
great. I love him. I was just like, bro, you are not going to someone else's wedding and then proposing immediately after. Like, what are
yeah.
you? Which is what he plans to do for any. That's
Well,
not a
I
stupid
feel like maybe some men might be a little clueless as to how, like, the lack of etiquette and that. And I think I might have even had him doing it the night of the wedding, and then I pared that back a
You're
little.
like, that's too strong.
Yeah, like, or at the wedding, I should say, because it was the night of the wedding. But yeah, um, yeah, but it's funny. I just wanted to say about the chronology that you mentioned. Initially, I had sort of envisioned this. I don't know if you read One Day. It's an older book by David Nichols, but I loved it at the time when it came out. And it follows a couple every year on the same day, like from college to the end, which I won't give away. But I do love that whole following a couple over the years. I don't know, it's my jam. Like I just read, and we'll keep talking about the rewind, but I've been talking about this book a lot. It's Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman, which takes place in two different timelines. And it was just so well executed, and you understood who they were then and you understood who they are now. And it's just, there's something very fulfilling about watching those two timelines merge. So I like to read it and I like to write it.
And you do it so well.
I
Um,
was just fishing for a compliment, really.
yes, no, you deserve it. You were not. Another fun thing that you're doing, so you're not just giving us a second chance trope. Um, you are giving us a straight up like 90s book.
Yeah.
Like this whole thing is set in
90s
the
all the
90s.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is incredibly fun and also something that like I knew it was 90s like themed-ish. I think that when I initially read about it, I thought it was like they went to college in the 90s and then like so we're doing like
Yeah.
some back and forth. And so then when again, guys, I promise we're not going to do any spoilers tonight.
Yeah.
This is like within the first like couple chapters, before they even, I guess it's during the prologue. Like I remember rereading the sentence, to make sure that I was right that she had actually pulled out her CD player,
Yes.
and I was like, wait. Seriously? And then I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, yeah, like we're hardcore. Like this whole thing is going to be in the 90s, which also added this like insanely fun element to this.
Thank
Um,
you.
why did you choose that? Why were we set in the 90s? What was the decision process around that?
So one was purely strategic. When I was conceiving of this idea, like with Laura on the phone on my walk, if you woke up in current time and you didn't know what happened, you would check your phone and you would see like maybe your pictures or your texts or social media. And so I had to get rid of smartphones, or else you can't do that concept anymore. I mean, The Hangover didn't have smartphones. You couldn't do it. So, but also I think in tapping into the nostalgia feel of the book, there is something, I mean, not for sort of like Gen Zers, but for maybe millennials and Gen Xers, there was something really pure about that era, whether or not it actually was. But it felt like, in hindsight, an easier time, like before sort of the chaos of social media, before the political unrest. It just felt like just a kinder, more nostalgic time to set a rom-com in. So there were two elements. One is, if I were going to do this, it had to be then, but also it's sort of what you said, like it's fun and it's pure and it's joyful. And I think for a lot of us, that's an easy time to point to and say, wow, it just felt simpler then. Like you weren't checking Twitter and feeling like you were going to go crazy. So, or comparing yourself to somebody on Facebook or whatever it is. So it worked out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely really interesting to hear you, like, say about it, because I didn't think about the element of, like, being able to check social media and making it easier to, like, track down, what has
Yeah.
transpired over this amount of time. I immediately, like, thought, like, "Oh, this is very fun because of, like, the nostalgia," and, like, I definitely think that regardless of whether you lived through the '90s or not, it's not like this is, like, references that are made are for everybody, like,
Yes.
and maybe some people more than others, like, you've given, like, fun Easter eggs, but it's like, we're not like everybody knows that, like, CD players were what we were mainly using, right?
Yeah.
Transitioning from the Walkman to CD players, etcetera, and so it's like, you've kept it, like, very accessible for every reader,
Thank
that
you.
maybe
So, like
something.
those yellow headphones that she wears in the elevator, like we all had those. And I knew I wanted to play around with music, and I felt like 80s and 90s music is so specific and referential to any generation. I mean, like my kids who are teenagers listen to 80s and 90s music, and it's really wild. But like to say like I don't know, Jesse's Girl was like playing in the bar that they were at. Like people get that. So that was I wanted to be able to do that.
Well, and that, like, kind of brings us to Frankie. You've created this really, interesting character, both in Frankie and in Ezra, and we'll get to both of them,
Yeah,
but I think let's start with Frankie, and her background is that she, is kind of up and coming slash maybe on, like, the upper end of up and
yeah,
coming, like,
yeah.
she's kind of made it, as a, music agent?
Manager. Yeah,
Yeah,
manager.
manager. For a very popular '90s, group,
Yeah,
and so what was I guess, has that always been something that like, was that always Frankie's character? Or, like, how did you draw out, I guess, Frankie
yeah.
and Ezra, in your kind of initial conceptions of them?
So she was always a music manager. I'm very into music, and I always say like if I weren't an author, like not that I could necessarily do this, but like my dream would be to be like a songwriter. So
Right.
I feel like music is pretty influential in everything, even if it doesn't show up on the page. Like I haven't stopped listening to Taylor Swift's new album. Like it's my daughter, like who's the biggest fan, is actually like I can't even take this. So but she was always that character. One difference was um I tend to write in my early drafts, I tend to write my women bitchier than they end up. I don't work to make them likable in any way because it's just very easy for me to tap into that, I don't know, just sort of bitchy character. So that is, I always have to peel that back as I go through every draft.
Okay.
So I think she was even more hardened initially. And then Ezra was too bland initially. So I
Okay.
had to really like, I think Frankie came easier for me to write, but I really ended up falling in love with Ezra as we went because he, um, a lot of trauma, and I don't necessarily relate to sort of his anxiety and his issues, but I felt for him. Like he's trying to do his best and he's making mistakes that are really only hurting him, whereas Frankie might be hurting other people.
Yeah, and our guy Ezra, like, is really, like, he's so lovely and, like, kind of soft in the best ways, I guess is what I would say too, of, like, something that
Yes,
we know about him going into it is that he's very accommodating as a boyfriend.
right,
And maybe misconstrues that as, like, that's what it means to be a good boyfriend. Like,
correct.
he kind of is willing to just go, very early on, like, for example, for everybody watching, he his girlfriend Mimi, who he is planning on proposing to, and then that ring ends up on Frankie's finger. Um, again, not a spoiler, just the beginning, yeah. um, he, but like his friend brings up to him that like he's there to see, or one of his friends that he's there to see. Uh, he like canceled like this really cool trip overseas because
Yeah,
Mimi like was sad that she'd be the only person without a partner on like this kind of trip. In like the northeast of the
right.
states. And I remember being like, "Oh, buddy, that sounds like you're a really good boyfriend, but like I don't know about this girl, man."
Well,
Doesn't sound
you know what I was doing with that is I felt like when my girlfriends and I were more single, I mean, most of us are, well, half of us are maybe married now. I felt like more often you saw girls making or women making compromises for their boyfriends than boyfriends making compromises for their girlfriends. So I thought it was interesting to play with that sort of masculinity and what we define as masculine or being a good boyfriend, because ostensibly a lot of us really want somebody who is super accommodating and maybe would cancel that trip, but it is really not the way to love a partner in a healthy way. And so that's really where I settled on with him. Thinking about sort of how some of us bent over backwards, like in our 20s, for men who were not super great. And that's what he ends up doing.
Yeah.
Oh, Ezra.
He works through some great things. We
That's right.
love Ezra. We're so proud of him.
Yeah, he does. I've just found myself rooting for him, even though he was so different than who I am. I just, you wanted him to figure himself out.
Yeah. Well, okay, so we have Frankie and we have Ezra, and they're obviously like our stars of the show. They're kind of our main characters. We spend most of our time with them,
Mhm.
figuring out what happened that evening, and what happened in their previous
Yeah.
breakup situation. But they also have like, again to reemphasize, they are at their college campus for a wedding, which means that they're surrounded by like other awesome people in their life. So what was it like to kind of build out the secondary cast of characters for this book?
That was another thing that changed from first draft to sort of final product or final book. I definitely brought them more center, or more into the plot. I loved writing Gregory. He was like such a busybody, but like actually not just meddling. Like he
Yeah.
knew what he was doing. And I feel like we all have a friend sort of like that. So I loved writing him. I loved writing Layla, who is sort of another voice of reason to Frankie's self-destruction. I felt like we went to college or high school. We all had experiences with people who are quite different than us, but who brought so much joy and sort of rounded us out in so many ways. So that's really what their friendship, their friend group does. Like April, who's the bride, is really different than Frankie, but Frankie owes her, she has a debt to her, which comes out. You see what she did for her by the end. And so I do feel like there are people in your life with whom you may not have that much in common anymore, but who your shared history still ties you to them. And that is as powerful as any friendship that you may have now. And that's really why Frankie shows up for them.
Yes, and like I'm really glad that we got more from them, because I do think that like many rom-coms will give us a secondary cast of characters
Yeah.
for sure. And then, at some point those characters potentially get their own book, depending on what
Yeah.
the author decides to do. But in so many ways, I feel like that I don't know how you did it, but it really made it feel more like I'm so attached to like a traditional 90s movie rom-com.
Right.
And I always feel that like our secondary characters in those are like really important to moving the story forward, to giving us these like different aspects of our main characters as
Right.
they're being
Right. Yeah.
or
Mary Met Sally, the two best friends are, foundational to the whole, you know, them coming together and them falling apart. So yeah.
yeah.
So that's sort of what I was going for. I mean, they weren't just there as window dressing. They actually helped our characters figure out what they wanted.
Yes, they were so like
Yeah.
intricate to the plot. I do want to go back to our music element a
Yeah.
little bit, because there's a fun one thing I want to mention about the book that people might not know if they haven't received their physical copy yet, is that we get a reading guide. So perfect for people to consider for book clubs, because there's a whole discussion guide. Have you seen your
Sure.
discussion guide?
I have, but I don't remember it. I think I probably wrote all these questions.
Well, don't worry. I'm not asking you like a huge question or anything, but I want to point that out because people love having reading guides for book club. But when I was looking through it, because I was just like, I'm curious what questions we would discuss as a book club if I was doing this. It did make me think. I really loved like the question around music and how Frankie has music that has really defined like important moments in her life.
Mhm.
And I think I got a little sampling of like you were saying Taylor Swift, you read it, you listened to it on repeat, like music really matters to you.
Yeah.
But like I guess I just want to talk about that like a little bit more because
Mhm.
immediately when I read that question, I was like, yes, there are sometimes songs that come on that I like will have completely forgotten.
Yeah.
Um, that, like, I care about them. Like, they're not something I
Mhm.
listen to on a regular basis, but, like, something random will happen where, like, it's in the playlist or it's in, like, an end of the year wrap up or whatever, and I'll realize that I have a very specific moment or memory in my life that is, like, for some reason attached to that song,
Yeah.
and, so I was wondering if that was, like, the same for you, and that's kind of also where this was coming at or what your experience was like with music in
I
that
mean,
way.
100%. What I think is so amazing about music is, first of all, you can hear a song from, you know, 20 years ago or your childhood, and you know all the lyrics, and you haven't heard it. Like I'm older than you, but I could hear like Corey Hart, and I could literally sing "You Never Surrender," having not heard it since I was 13. So I think if you love music, like that just takes up it's like an emotional uh part of your memory. I like I don't even know how to explain it. But so for example, I was back in my college reunion back in May, and certain songs came on, like for us at the time, it was Madonna's Like a Prayer. And it is literally like you were back, you were 19 years old, and like there's a choreographed dance, and like it doesn't matter that you're in your 40s now. And so there are just moments. So for music for me is just so, it just transports me to so many different, heartbreaks and triumphs and uh specific, real specificity for me. So that's what I wanted for Frankie. And that's actually what happens with her. It really does help trigger her memory, and bring back a lot of things for her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's ugh, so fun. I also loved for some reason, I'm very attached to Pat Benatar. Um,
me too. I love her. Who doesn't love her?
I don't know, and, like, the
That Love is the Battlefield video, by the way, when I was like in middle school or younger, it was like so racy at the time. And like I remember being shocked by it, and they were like shimmying, and I think they were prostitutes. Anyway, she was like a trailblazer. Yeah, I love
she
her.
was, and so that was, like, the first thing of I bring that up, I think you know, but I bring that up because Shadows of the Night is, like, our kind of right the last thing that you read before you dive into the book of,
Yeah,
like, you have this lovely dedication to, I was imagining it was your son.
that is my son. Yeah.
A lovely dedication to Campbell, who was a
His,
newborn.
his college applications were due today too. So it's been a great, it's been a totally unstressful week for me. So yeah.
Oh my gosh. Were you
Yeah.
also trying to get your Taylor Swift tickets? Are
Yeah,
you in
well,
like
it's funny. My daughter actually texted me like first thing this morning. Not like congratulations. She's like, OMG, I'm gonna be at camp when she comes to LA. We have to fly somewhere else to see her. And I'm like, okay, I will deal with this tomorrow. So yeah.
yeah, you
Anyway,
gotta get that Ticketmaster, like, registration through so you can get
oh,
in.
I did that for Harry Styles. Like, yeah,
You know
I'm
what you're doing.
I know what
So,
I'm
lots of
doing.
plans for you this week on top of launching a book.
Yeah, exactly. But
But yeah,
anyway, so yeah, I started with the dedication. I cut you off. Yeah.
oh, no, yeah, you gave us this lovely dedication to Campbell, and then you give us Pat Benatar, and then we dive into the rewind.
Right.
And so I was just like, as soon as I read Pat Benatar, I was like, "Let's go, Allison. I know what's gonna happen. I'm in. I'm ready. Let's go." So I just wanted to shout that out.
Oh, thank you. Just I actually I thought really hard about that epigraph. Like I looked at every possible. I wanted it to be a female singer because
Mhm.
Frankie represents female artists. And I mean, I looked at every 80s song that I could, and then I was like, it's like, you know what? Pat Benatar, she's like a bad bitch. Let's do it. Like she's like who Frankie would love. So, and I love that song. I feel like it's an underrated song of hers. So
It's so good.
so good.
It's so
It's
good.
so
Yes, I'm
good.
with you on that. It's so good.
Yeah.
Okay. I am curious how, so like you and I kind of talked about this very briefly in the
Yeah,
backstage, but this has kind of been like a return to form for you of like
yeah,
you are not a newbie to rom-coms by any means, but you do have 8 novels in
yeah.
totality like out in the world. And then now we have, this is number 9, right? Like this makes,
Hold it up again. Yeah, this is
yeah.
number 1. Yeah, and my
Um,
my 10th is also a rom-com. So,
and so like I guess this is kind of a two-part question. So we'll start with just the first part, but what was it like? How did your writing experience of the rewind compare to like some of the stuff that you've done recently? Like I'm thinking of like Cleo McDougal and um specifically that's one that came to mind for
yeah,
me. But any of your writings, like how was it to kind of work on this during COVID and compare it to some of your past work?
it's interesting. I don't know if it was COVID or I don't know, just sort of my mindset these days. I genuinely just wanted to write something joyful.
Mhm.
I felt like um, it had been a hard few years, COVID, and a variety of other things, and I like all through COVID and even before that, like I couldn't watch heavy dramas. I was watching like a sitcom every night. Like I rewatched all of 30 Rock, like anything that I could like do to sort of self-medicate in terms of joy. So and you and I were talking beforehand. I mean, I've read so many rom-coms and they really make me happy. Like they can be brilliantly written, but with not a ton of stress, and that's totally my jam right now. So when I was writing this, like I didn't feel like I had to say anything. I didn't have to like make it a message. It didn't have to be. I think maybe earlier in my career, I was like aiming maybe for more prestige. Which is not to say that rom-coms are not prestigious, because I think there are brilliant ones being written right now. Really just wanted to write something that could make people happy because that's what I wanted. So, um, and it was sort of refreshing, like just write something joyful. And I don't know. And that's what I allowed myself to do. And that's what I'm doing with my new one. And I was like rereading the first 100 pages to send in. And I was like, you know what? This is really fun. Like that is enough I mean, I'd like it to be well written, and, good characters, but like bringing readers something fun and joyful is a high bar, and that's fine. So that was sort of my attitude with it.
I think it's really funny to hear authors talk about stuff of like what you're saying kind of reminds me of we hosted Catherine Center earlier this
Oh
year
yeah.
for the Bodyguard.
Mhm.
And she was like telling us how she had a conversation with her editor when she like kind of initially pitched, or her agent maybe it was, but
Yeah.
when she initially pitched the idea, and she was just like, "Is that too fun?" And everybody was like, "No, like we need the fun."
That's I
And
really think, yeah, I love Catherine's books. She and I sort of started out together. I mean, we've both been doing it for a long time, and I think that that's right. And I do think like, maybe in the early onset of your career, or maybe in the middle, like you feel like you need to write something heavier and more critically acclaimed. And you know what? I just don't think that anymore. Like I just want to write something that makes readers happy and that makes me happy and that I would want to read. So that's what I'm writing.
here we are, which you kind of teased us a little bit. Oh wait, I said it was part 1. Now let's make sure before I move on that, oh no, this was part 2. This is where I was going with part 2 anyways. Don't
Okay,
worry. We're good. We're on track. I've just been known to lose occasionally maybe lose the trail of the thread.
that's
Um,
okay. I wouldn't have
but
even noticed. Didn't even remember that there was a part two. Yeah.
But no, part 2 is gonna be this of you kind of teased us a little bit there of like you are, as with any author, most of the time when you're on tour, you're actively working on your second book. Sometimes you have a deadline looming over
Oh
your
yeah.
head for the second
Mhm.
book while you're
2
trying
weeks.
to
Yeah.
tour.
2 weeks.
Um, and so what can you tell us about the second one? You teased that it's also a rom-com.
And it's
Um,
also a second chance romance. Yes, no surprise. So it is about America's sweetheart, like the most famous actress in the world, who has a fall from grace and returns home to and finds an anonymous love letter and has to track down who sent it, partially to save her career, but partially to maybe see if it's somebody who she's, wants a second shot at. So I haven't like honed that pitch, but that is
No,
generally
that
it's
was a great
yeah,
pitch.
it's an anonymous love letter that she sets out to find with a reporter. So
Did you so you used to do celebrity profiles. Is
I did.
that kind of how this
And
idea
I live in Los Angeles. So um it came up. So I actually initially had her in the very first draft. She was like a world famous romance writer. And it just like both my editor and my agent were like, even if it were Colleen Hoover, like she's not recognizable. Like nobody cares. Like you guys can't go, like you can go to the grocery, not me, but she can go to the grocery store and it doesn't matter. So I had to sort of up the stakes with an actor, but um it does get into sort of the public persona and the way that public the public likes to tear women down specifically. I mean, it's not like a messagey book, but it was an easy thing to transfer and understand that how quickly the tide could turn on her. So it's actually really it's very fun. So
I can't wait. Listen,
thank
I'm
you.
really excited, and we're gonna sit in our enjoyment of the rewind, but we're also gonna
Thank
be
you.
excited for that one. Yes.
Yeah, it's called The Retake, and I've seen cover mock-ups, and it's Berkeley, my publisher, they're just amazing. So I'm really they're cool. Yeah,
Oh my gosh, the retake. Okay, let's
yeah,
great. So
like
we're done now. We're done. No, we're good. We're out.
yeah, and I it's coming out this time next year. So we'll be back. I'll come back, we'll pick this up
This
next time
time next
next
year.
year. Yeah.
Isn't this time next year a movie with Alan Alda? Am I making that
Oh
up?
yeah, yeah. I don't. It is a movie. I don't know. Is that who stars in
I'm
it?
sorry, it's on my brain because it's what I was thinking of when you were talking about something else, earlier in of,
Oh, one day when I was talking about one day.
yes,
Yes.
of,
Yes.
like that was my first, thing that
Yeah.
I saw that introduced me to the concept of, like, because it follows them on the same day
Yeah.
every year where they
Yes,
meet up.
exactly.
The
Maybe that's where David Nichols got the idea. It's a great book, although some people don't like the ending, but I loved it.
You're like, "It's up for debate, we can talk about it." Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, okay, one question I always think is incredibly fun to ask authors is this, and that is that, like, as a reader, context for it, as a reader, we get, like, X amount of hours with a book.
Mhm.
Maybe some of us are good at dragging out, like, if we really can't get to the end, maybe some of us are good at pacing ourselves, others are just we're gonna, like, dive in and be done and read it in one sitting. But no matter what, we have kind of a finite period of time that we spend with these characters reading this story. You
Mhm.
have spent so much time with them
Yeah.
because you have had to conceive of them, rewrite them multiple times, go through all of these editing rounds. What is it like to have to say goodbye to Ezra and Frankie? And like most importantly, like
Oh,
what do you miss the
that's
most
a
about
good question. I I am somebody I have a hard time walking away from my characters, which is I had to turn around on the next book quite quickly, and it was a little hard for me in my initial draft because I still sort of I have like a hangover with them. I think the hardest part for me walking away from them is honestly just that time period for me. Like I really understood who they were back in college, and I understood their longing to figure themselves out and maybe figure themselves out together. Um, so it's not so much that I miss them because I feel like they're on their way. Like I'm a parent and I'm like, okay, they're set. But I really loved writing in the 90s, like to what we were talking about. And I really love to get back to what we talked about at the very beginning, that sort of wide open time in your early 20s where no choices have been made that are permanent and anything is possible in your life. So I find that in my 40s, I there's something so sort of yearning about that time for me, or I don't think that I said that grammatically correctly, but just the that nostalgia for your youth. I think it's that's what I miss about spending time with them. So, having too many drinks and falling over on like your college walkway. So, or whatever. So, well, you teacher watch you. So I'm sure you still see that a lot. So,
I
but
do.
yeah,
Yes. Oh, yes. I hear some great stories.
yeah, I'm
Very
sure.
interesting stories. But yeah, I was just like it's so hard, I think, as a reader being like, I'm terrible at pacing myself. I can't
Mm,
make myself, like, drag out a read of, like I will just, like, I'm actually one of those people
same.
that, like, occasionally, depending on the ending of a book, I'll have to go back and reread something because 'cause I'm like, "Ooh, I definitely missed something there. That's different than where that I thought that was
Yeah,
happening."
same.
And what assumptions did I accidentally make,
Yes,
while I was, like, trying to
same.
finish it?
Yeah, I think I told you in the intro, like, I've been up so late just reading till, like, 1:32. I can't stop myself. I actually set a timer the other night at, like, 11:40 to, like, go off so I would go to bed, and I was like, "Oh, well, okay," and I turned the timer off and I kept going, yeah. It was so good, I couldn't stop myself.
I'm particularly bad at doing that with, like, rom-coms because sometimes when I'm reading something, if it's, like, a little bit dark, I'll be like, "I actually think this is a good place to
Yeah,
stop." 'Cause, like, if
me
I go
too,
any further but, like, a rom-com where I know I'm gonna be taken care of, I
for
especially can't
sure.
stop if we've hit, like, our 3rd act breakup, and I'm like, "This is not the note that I can end on."
Yeah, yeah, you just wanna get there, you wanna yeah, I mean, same,
Yeah.
same.
So,
Yeah.
um one of the things I did want to talk about before there's two more. Please, anybody who's watching, if I've not asked a question, if you have a question that you're burning to ask Allison, please throw that into the comments. We will make sure that we get to it. Um, Otherwise, y'all, I'm going to take over because I just have so many of them.
Let's
Um, you had such a fun. I always like reading an author's acknowledgments. I think that they are a little known thing, not known. What am I trying to say? They're not really paid attention to. I feel like we don't talk about it a lot. It's kind of at the end
Well,
of
we
the month.
spend a lot of time writing them, so read them, yeah.
You do spend that makes sense. That makes
Yes,
sense. You
we
would spend
do.
a lot of time reading them.
Yeah.
And yours was so fun. And we kind of talked about Laura Dave, and you give a
Mhm.
shout out to Elizabeth Weed. Um, and then also I got excited because I saw a lot of fun people. I feel bad because I'm like not reading everybody's name, but there's a lot of cool people in it. But I got really excited because I saw Ashley Spivey's name,
Oh, I
which
love Ashley so much.
and Hitha, which
Yeah, and Hitha,
uh,
I love her too.
I get her. For anybody who doesn't know, she's got a great newsletter that goes out every day that gives
I
you
feel
like
like I learn some stuff from her Instagram, like, all the time, so, yeah, and I
incredible.
love Ashley, I met Ashley, like, probably I think she read my 2nd book and, like, tagged me on something, so that was, like, 2010 or something, so I've known her for a long time, and she is such a fan of the book, like, such a friend to the book community, I love what she does. Same with Hitha, I mean, great women.
They're amazing. I like
Yeah.
don't know them personally, but I just am very into. I did watch Ashley on The Bachelor, but more importantly, she has a great online community for
She
book
does.
people, and I've always been like, yeah, very active in
Yeah,
Spivey's book club, and so
yeah,
yeah, it's very fun to see some familiar names in your acknowledgement. But I always like to shout that out because again, I
yeah,
think it's really fun to go through and read. Like it gives us an insight into an author of what mattered to you all when you were
yeah,
writing this,
yes.
who was around to
And
support
and
you.
again, like, I feel like I mean, that's such a limited like, I tried to limit it to people who were specific to this book, but as we were saying in the beginning, the author community is so, just generous, like, um, Liz and Lisa, I don't really know them, Taylor Jenkins Reid is a good friend of mine, and she posted about it today. Like, there are just so many people who, it's just I don't know, it's a really special place to be a part of, so,
Totally.
yeah.
Um, no, they're all just yeah. It's very fun to see who's friends with each other too. Like, to make all the
Yeah.
connections with the reader.
It is a little like I don't mean insular in the sense that like we don't welcome newcomers because I think like we love a debut writer. And in fact, Laura and I were just talking the other day about how the best energy is spent supporting debut authors because like that's really, they're like, you want to raise them up. But it's a really nice supportive community, 99% of the people in there. So
Yeah.
yeah, Emily Giffen has been so nice to me, and like just Jodi Picoult, like it's just crazy. It's just nice. So,
um, Ooh, okay, we have some great questions coming through. People have been spending some great time. Don't worry, everybody. Everyone's now also apologizing for their typos. It's all good. We're all
I'm
fine.
putting my glasses on. I can't see them.
No
So
one will
go
see it. Yeah.
ahead.
So Pam is wondering, when you write, do you see yourself in your characters, and or are you working your issues out via your characters?
So I definitely, as I said, I write sort of hardened women, and I'm not hardened, but I don't know, like I can have an attitude. So, so I would say a lot of my women tend to sort of, I don't know, they just don't take a lot of shit, which is probably where I see myself. As I said, I had to relate to Ezra, which was actually a really interesting process. Like I didn't necessarily get him at first, and as each draft that went on, I had a deeper understanding of him. I don't work out my issues in the sense of like, uh, I don't know. I don't know that a lot of authors really relate, like put their real lives on the page. It just actually makes your writing more difficult. But as I said, like I understood that sense of wanting to have that sort of youthfulness again. So if that's like an issue, then sure. I mean, I do like to look around at sort of what's happening in the world or what my peer group is going through. And I did that with Cleo McDougall, who plays a female politician. And it's not a political book, but it's probably a feminist book in that like a lot of women are going through some stuff right now. And so I wanted to explore that. So that's more what I do, sort of cultural explorations, less personal explorations.
That makes complete sense. And what a great question, Pam. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, this next one might be a little tricky. Not like a sorry, just tricky in the sense of Janie already like said at the top, like without spoiling anything. And
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay.
Hopefully you'll be able to kind of vaguely answer this.
Yeah.
So something happens to Frankie on the plane, and
Oh, yeah.
Janie is wondering why you chose that as opposed to what have been a deliberate choice on Frankie's part.
Correct. Okay, so this is tricky to talk about without a spoiler. I went back and forth on that. And when we were selling the book, one editor felt strongly it should be the other choice. And I will say that Frankie intended it to be the other choice. And I did write this a few years ago, or I wrote the draft maybe a year or two ago. So sort of before some of this was in the news. It just, I don't remember actually making sort of a decision about how it should be other than, and I would have been comfortable with whatever choice she had made. Again, we're speaking in a lot of vigarities here, but for the spoiler, I just felt like it worked that she got off the plane and it was over. Instead of drawing it out further for the plot, because I had something to say about it. So that's really where it was. I would have been fine with whatever her decision had been. Again, I'm trying to sort of dance around the
I think you're doing great.
Does that work, Stephanie? Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a personal decision. It's just, it worked for that part of the book.
I think for people who have read it, you get it, and people who haven't, you will, and you can call back to this moment to understand it. Okay. Another question. Janie says thank you. So I think
yeah, I hope that you're welcome to message me and we can talk about it. It was something that was discussed, and it was for the plot purposes, not for any other reason.
Audria is asking, what is your draft writing process like?
It's a mess. So
we love a mess. We love it.
Yes. So I do not outline. I just start with, I think in this case, I started with this concept of like, I wanted two exes to wake up together, and I just go. And so my first drafts are really rough. Particularly this book was really complicated because there were 3 timelines going on at once. There was their 20s, there was the night before, and then there was the day of. So,
yeah, 2 timelines are only a day apart from each
other. Yeah, exactly. And it's all like over 24 hours. So this book was really it was really difficult. And I say in the acknowledgments, like I wrote it without being under contract, and I kept begging my editor like every 50 pages. I was like, I'm out. I mean, my agent, I think you might be watching, not my editor. I was like, I'm out, I'm done, sell it. And she's like, no, you have to write the whole thing. And I really tried to quit a bunch of times. But I just start at the first page and I end up at the last page when I'm writing. And then I probably stop every 100 pages and I revise, but then I go back, and if I'm not under contract, my agent is an invaluable editor, so she'll read it and give me notes, and then eventually it gets to sort of like B plus level, and then my editor comes in and really helps me get it done.
It is so funny to me that, I know it was not funny to you, but I think that you're pretty open in your acknowledgments how often you wanted to, like,
Oh
quit
my
this book, and it's so funny because it feels like it was such an effortless book for you that, like, it's just hilarious to have both that perspective of, like, in that way, I do love that acknowledgments are at the end because it's
yeah.
like, I just like, "Oh my god, I just had a great time. You were amazing," and then you're like, "I hated everything."
When she called me, like when we sold it, I was like, thank you. You were right. And like, I'm not great at always admitting that, but I mean, it was just so difficult. But I mean, I'm very proud of it. And I really actually love the book so much. So um, I'm glad she made me do it. But
Yeah.
that's why hopefully, if you're in a position to be an author, you surround yourself by smart people. So that's what she is.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Okay, Kristen just came in with a question. Kristen is wondering, why did you start writing fiction and what keeps you writing?
Oh, that is a great question. So I was a freelance writer for back when magazines were really big. And I sort of, I mean, sadly they're not, but I wrote, for sort of Self and Shape, like all the big women's magazines. And I had always wanted to write a book, but like a lot of people, that was just sort of something I said. And I was reading my college magazine where people would write in, this is sort of pre-Facebook, I guess, people would write in what they were doing. And Sarah Dunn, who is an amazing author, and I absolutely loved her last book, by the way, if you haven't read it, had written in that she was a couple of years ahead of me in college, and she was on her second novel. She was announcing it. And I was like, oh, like she's 3 years older than I am, and she's on her second book. And I'm just like talking about doing it. So I put together a manuscript, and it wasn't very good, but it like sort of taught me that I could get to the end of it. And I had a decent skill set from the freelance writing. And then I had little kids at the time, and I had like probably 6 frantic deadlines a week with the magazines, and it just felt like untenable. So I got an agent, and she couldn't sell the book. And so we parted ways. And then I wrote another one, and I got my current agent, and we sold the book. And that's just, it's one of these things where I always say, if people are like, I think I have a book in me, I'm like, well, it's just a blank page if you don't actually write it. So it really just came from that. Like I had the drive to write a book. And I think, when I was younger, I wanted to be an actress. So there's a lot of the same imagination tools that you employ. So it allowed me to do that, but maybe with words.
Yeah. I did love reading in, I think it was on your website that you wanted to be an actress. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, tell me more.
I did, but you know what? Like it turned out that I don't care where I fictionalize things. Like, and I'm really love language. So this worked out well. My mom was an English teacher. So I think my brother and I were taught to like,
Yes, you've
have a
always had
reverence for, yeah. Yeah. So
um, okay, we're coming to sometimes my favorite time of the entire hour that we spend together. And that is this or that. These
yep.
are not hard. These are not intended to be hot seat questions. There is only one rule, and that
Okay.
is, Allison, if you don't like one of the 2 options I give you, you must provide your 3rd option. You simply
Okay. I'm like
answer
sweating. This is
a
very
question.
okay.
I know, it makes everybody feel really worried, and you have
I
nothing
know.
to
I'm like
talk
on edge. Okay, let's do it.
about. Obviously, we had to go with a '90s theme. What
Mhm.
else would we do? Um And then I wrote one down. I threw in a Taylor Swift question for you, but
Oh,
that's
okay.
just how we're gonna end on,
I
because
meant
it
it
felt
to
like
dial my daughter, like if you can phone a friend or whatever. But okay, I'm quite familiar with her oeuvre, so let's do it.
You'll be able to answer this Taylor Swift one
Okay.
for sure. I know it. Okay, first question. I went boy bands on this. We can round up a girl band one as well,
Okay.
because obviously we care a lot about that. But
Yeah.
the perpetual 90s question: NSYNC or Backstreet Boys?
Backstreet Boys. Done. I don't like Justin Timberlake. Okay, Stephanie, I don't like him.
Allison, break my heart in real time. Oh my
I
gosh.
don't
Okay.
like Justin Timberlake. So
Listen,
I just
Backstreet's Back is a bop. We have
it,
a
it is. And this is one of the songs that my daughter listens to. She'll like put on like everybody. I'm not gonna sing, but yeah, we listen to that. Yeah. Yeah. No, Backstreet Boys. I don't like Justin Timberlake.
I mean, incredible opinion.
All over my desk.
No, that is way to have a good. I'm sure that everybody somewhere thinks that's a really good opinion. It's a little heartbreaking for me, but like I'm gonna live. I'm gonna make it. I don't know that I need to like defend that man's honor. Like
Yeah,
I'm gonna like lay my life on the line.
Okay. And we can get into this offline. I actually have very strong feelings about him.
Oh my god. Yeah, we're gonna take that. We're gonna take that to the ground. Okay.
Default that I choose the Backstreet Boys. But yeah.
I would
actually choose, if we're talking boy bands, I would choose One Direction if we can bring it forward.
Open it up to everything outside. Wow. I mean, who doesn't hate that choice? That's a great choice. Okay, incredible. Moving to television.
Okay.
Two of our hit TV 90s shows: Seinfeld and Friends.
Friends.
Yeah, both have had, I mean, listen, if you try to rewatch them, I'm not saying either of them like super holds up in this period of
yes, correct.
For varying reasons. They both have some downfalls, if we're being honest about, as does the rest of the 90s, as we acknowledged. It was not a perfect time. Friends, did you have the Rachel?
I feel like I still sort of have. I didn't have a Rachel, but I feel like we had like the highlights, like the chunky highlights. I remember watching Friends, and it's actually in another one of my books, In 20 Years, which is set on a college campus. I remember watching it sort of at the tail end of my college experience, whereas Seinfeld, which I watched, but I don't know. Friends is just more nostalgic for me. And I watched a few episodes over COVID, just like when I ran out of something else to watch. And they've acknowledged that there are problems with it now, but it's just it's like light and effervescent and delightful still. So, I mean, Seinfeld's still funny, but you made me choose. So
exactly. Listen. There's no wrong answers here. Even if I made you feel that there was one with NSYNC, that's on me.
Have an opinion, Friends. Boom. Let's do it.
Moving to some 90s fashion, which
I'm
really excited about this. Okay, as we might recall, chokers have been in at varying stages of life, but they had a real lace chokers, the crisscross plastic chokers had a real moment in the 90s. So chokers or jelly sandals?
Oh my God. I thought you were going to say jelly bracelets. Well, I had both. So do you mean like now? I mean, on campus. So like anything that could be 90s, I had the baby doll dresses, the high waisted, like acid washed Levi's. I would go with a choker necklace, which I think could maybe still be sexy, but like those jelly sandals are not. Like they're just
not, and your feet are not used to it. They're gonna get wet and sweaty, and they're gonna get blister.
Blisters. I'm practical. I would do I feel like they could still sort of. I feel like they had a moment a few years ago again.
They did. Actually, I was researching this to be sure that I was like not going to say something that like was just my association of the 90s. Like what's a universal truth? And there was like a lot of like, well, first of all, it was like the choker came around in the 1920s, and I was like, yes, thank you so much, but that's not what we're talking about.
Not like the Claire's lace,
Yeah. that was firmly 2000s, and then it says it did make it into the runway in like 2012 or something.
Yeah, I think I saw it come back. And P.S. I have a teenage daughter, and they wear everything that we wore back then, like the
Oh, yeah.
docks and the high-waisted baggy jeans and the oversized sweatshirts. Like it's all
Yeah,
back.
we're back.
Yeah, we're back. Yeah.
Okay, everyone's just having a great time. In the comments. Great. Love
Are they mad at me about trashing Justin Timberlake?
No. They're laughing at us because Jamie's association of a boy band is the Eagles, which she then received.
I mean, that is a boy band.
Is a boy band
Yeah.
received support for everyone's having a good time.
Okay.
Okay, one of our final questions: Furbies or Tamagotchis?
So neither of these was my thing, but I will say Furbies. I don't know. I don't actually know what the right answer is here.
There's no right answer. No.
I don't know. What would you do?
So I had both.
Okay. Maybe
And
I had a Tamagotchi. I cannot. I honestly can't remember.
they're the thing that like you had to
like feed or whatever. Like what?
Yeah, take care of them. They were like a little like a keychain of them.
Maybe I'll say that. I think maybe I had one of those.
Tamagotchi. So Furbies are a thing, but like wow, they got annoying real
Yeah.
fast.
Okay. So I recant that, and
no, but they were so cute. And when I lifted them back up, I was like,
yeah,
you're cute. Your big eyes. Like I think you do well in this time. Like I think I could have had fun with you. But I have a very like specific memory where so my siblings are actually 13 and 15 years older than me.
Oh, okay.
And there was at one point a group effort to keep the Tamagotchi alive because it would die like every night. And so one night my brother like set an alarm and woke up like every hour to like take care of this Tamagotchi so that we could like get it to like the next level. And it was like a family affair of keeping this.
So then let's do Tamagotchi. Let's do that. That's what I would do.
You don't have a specific Tamagotchi memory imprinted in your brain?
I feel like, I mean, I know of them, and but I don't know if I had one. Yeah. So
Amy's saying that her kids had Tamagotchis and people had to ban them. So yes, I'm sorry to bring up everybody's Tamagotchi.
Yeah, our hardships.
Yeah, where we all couldn't have them.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. There were like so many fun things. It was so hard to narrow this list down of like what 90s flashbacks we would do. I almost asked you about Spice Girls versus anybody else because you obviously make your feelings like a little bit known about Spice Girls.
Well, I make actually Frankie's feelings known. Okay. I don't have a problem with the Spice Girls. And I will say, actually, living in LA, they lived here for a while and were at our school, and I got to know them because my son was friends with one of their kids, and they're actually very lovely people. So I actually did not that she would ever see this, but I didn't want to like say anything derogatory about them. But I mean, the Spice Girls at the time, well, for pop, they were a thing. I mean, they were obviously sort of more emo, like a Courtney Love or what, there were other women doing it, but it was more Frankie being like, ugh, like they're so commercialized, but
Frankie's looking for her original group that she can.
Right, exactly. But listen, anybody from Pat Benatar to, Sporty Spice helped pave the way for somebody even like Taylor Swift now, because, women have not always had a fair shake in the music industry. May still not, certainly in like country music, do not have a fair shake. So no, I won't disparage them.
No disrespect.
No disrespect, exactly. And wannabe like still bops. So, yeah.
That's one of those songs where like I can still do every single line of that.
Yeah, exactly. Like who am I to say that's not great entertainment? So
true.
Yeah.
You brought up our girl Taylor Swift. This is not a hard question, but just like where do we fall in midnights? Like what song are you really vibing with right now?
Oh my God. I literally can't stop listening to it. It's a problem. I had it on, like I was working out the other day underneath my daughter's room, and my daughter is obsessed with her, as most teenage girls are. I mean, it's Harry Styles, then Taylor Swift. But and like she texts me, she's like, again, question mark, question mark, question mark. And I'm like, yes, I am gonna listen to this again. Like, sorry about that. Okay, so I really like You're on Your Own, Kid.
Okay.
Maroon,
Mhm.
Question,
Mm.
Mastermind. Oh my God, there's a twist in that song where the dude knows that she's the mastermind. That just like every time she gets to it, I'm like, it just anyway. I love it. What else? What's your favorite?
Ooh, it's really hard.
Oh, I like Karma.
I
I
was
like
like, Karma, I'm having
Bejeweled.
a really good time with. Vigilante shit, I'm having
Vigilante
a really
Shit,
good time with.
Bejeweled.
Bejeweled Bejeweled I really love because I love Laura Dern, and I love that, and I love Haim, and so I'm just, like,
Yeah,
really, like, I think I'm really attached to Bejeweled. I mean, it's a great song, but I think, like, that music
it
video,
grew
like
on me. I didn't like it at first, and now I'm like, when I walk into the room, I'm like the whole world. Like, I'm like walking my dogs. Like,
well, and my favorite thing too is that even though, oh my gosh, why did it go out of my brain? The one that's all over TikTok right now.
oh, Antihero. Is it
Yes,
Antihero? Yeah,
yes, of
I
just that, like,
too.
I was so, like, I felt like I was done with that song before it even began because I just, like, heard it from
Yeah,
you're hearing it from all directions,
yeah.
but it's really just that song clip of, like, I can't stop listening to it. Like,
Oh no,
it's like, and
I
it's the song
also
clip.
for like the first 3 days, Taylor Jenkins Reid and I were like texting each other because we could not stop. I'm like, she's like, I just cried in my shower. I'm like, I just danced around to Antihero in my bathroom 3 times. Like I obsessed. Like so, it's yeah.
What
It
a blessing to us all that this fall
yeah,
brought us a new album.
exactly. You know what? Like at first, my first listen, I was like, oh, I really want like a stadium, like
Mm,
bop that can just, I don't know, like Shake It Off. I don't know if you've seen her in
yeah.
concert, but she shuts down the stadium for that. Or like I love Long Live, which is sort of from her older. But anyway, this we've now turned this into a Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift fangirl experience.
But the more I listen to it, the more like I just love it. And I love on the 3 a.m. one, The Great War,
Mm,
which
mhm.
Barnes and Noble actually like shouted out was like the rewind was the equivalent of like the match to that book.
Yeah.
Um, I was like, my career is over. I have
This
been
is all I needed. We're done here.
I'm done. That's it. So I mean, my career is over in a good way. I could retire. Not my career is over. So I don't know. She's just, you know what it is? It gets back to what we were talking about with language. Her language is so specific that like she's just such a storyteller that I love her lyrics so much. So, you know.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, to listening to us talk about Taylor Swift for such a
Oh,
long
I'm sorry.
What else can we do? We have to it had to be done. It
Yeah.
had to be done. We can't not acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to know.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Sadly, our time has come to an end.
Oh,
Um,
fun.
but this has been such an incredibly fun way to celebrate. Thank you everyone who has been watching. I think from the comments, everybody is picking up their copy of the Rewind tonight. But if you don't have a copy, or if you realize that you need to gift this to a friend, please don't hesitate to order it from us. We can get it in the mail to you. We're absolutely obsessed with it. Allison, do you want to say anything before we sign off
No,
for the
I
evening?
just want to say this has been so much fun. I love supporting indie bookstores. If you're watching, like if you're a friend or family of mine, go to the Novel Neighbor and order it from them. No, I just, it's important. Like women-owned bookstores, or businesses in general. This has just been a total pleasure. So thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We'll leave this up for a little bit so you can come back, revisit some of it, and have like a good time or share it out with a friend. Uh,
Yeah.
otherwise, all right. Allison, let's wave goodbye to everybody. Bye, everybody. Good night.
I can't see anyone, but thank you.